I fell asleep in a billionaire's bed, still in my maid uniform, smelling like bleach and cheap soap. And when I opened my eyes, he was standing over me, staring like my whole future was in his hands. One stupid, exhausted mistake, 60 seconds with my eyes closed in the wrong place, and I was sure my little sister was going to lose her medicine, and we were going to lose our home. But what if I told you that falling asleep in that bed not only saved her life, it exposed how ugly power can be destroyed a family legacy, and forced me to choose between love and survival, faith and fear. Would you even believe that? My name is Maria, and this is not a fairy tale. This is how my real life got tangled up with one of the richest families in the city. How a poor hotel maid from a small town outside Charlotte ended up being the girl everyone whispered about. The one people said must have done something to catch a billionaire's eye. I wish they knew the truth, that when all of this started, I didn't want his attention. I just wanted enough money to keep my sister's heart beating and a roof over our heads. I grew up in a little town where you knew the sound of every neighbor's car, where Sunday mornings smelled like coffee and hairspray and church candles, where my grandma's voice carried through the house reading her Bible out loud, while my mom fried chicken for the after-service potluck. We didn't have much, but we had warmth, second-hand clothes, hand-me-down smiles, a house that creaked when the wind hit it right, and this feeling that somehow we were held. You know what I mean? Like life was hard, but not cruel. My mom was the heart of that world. She'd tuck me in at night, brush my hair back from my forehead, and say, "Faith is your anchor, baby. When the storm comes, you hold on to God, not to the boat." And I'd roll my eyes because I was a kid, and storms were something that happened on the Weather Channel, not in hospital rooms. I didn't understand what she was really preparing me for. The storm came when I was 16. Cancer showed up like a thief in the night, and it did not play fair. One month my mom was humming in the kitchen, dancing with a dish towel in her hand. The next month she was in a hospital bed with hollow cheeks and tired eyes, pretending she wasn't in pain, so I wouldn't be afraid. My dad took on every extra shift he could get, driving trucks, working weekends, sitting at the kitchen table with bills spread out like a losing hand of cards. And I watched him shrink too, not in body, but in spirit. She was gone in less than 6 months. Just like that. One day, there was a person who had always known how to make everything feel a little bit better the next day. There was a hole, and grief moved into our house and refused to leave. My dad tried to keep going, tried to be both parents at once, but every time he looked at me, I could see it in his face. I looked too much like her. 2 years later, he left a note on the table saying he needed to clear his head for a few days. Those days turned into weeks. The phone stopped ringing, and then there was nothing. No calls, no letters, no child support. Just me and my little sister, and an empty chair at the table. My sister Elena was born with a congenital heart defect. The doctors explained it with charts and big words, but what it meant in real life was this. Without medication, every single day, her heart could misfire. Her chest could tighten unexpectedly. She could faint walking up a flight of stairs. Those little bottles from the pharmacy were the difference between her laughing with me on the couch and me riding in the back of an ambulance, staring at her pale face. Her medication cost more than our rent most months. So the day my dad walked out, childhood ended for me. I didn't get to worry about prom dresses or SAT prep. I was doing math in my head all the time. If I walk instead of taking the bus, can that money go toward Elena's refill? If I eat ramen for 3 days, can I stretch the groceries long enough to cover her copay? I worked anywhere that would hire me. Diners, cleaning jobs, stocking shelves. But the job that stuck, the one that mattered most in this story, was housekeeping at the Grand Crest Hotel in the city. The Grand Crest was like another universe compared to our little apartment. All glass and marble and polished brass chandeliers that looked like upside-down gardens of light, quiet hallways that smelled like money and imported perfume. People came there to pretend their lives were perfect, to drink champagne that cost what I made in a month, to sleep on sheets so soft they didn't feel real. I came there to scrub the toilets and change those sheets to move like a ghost through their temporary perfection. Every morning I got up before sunrise, packed Elena's pills into a little organizer, kissed her forehead while she was still half asleep, then walked 2 miles to the bus stop. Because gas and insurance were so far beyond my budget, it was almost funny. I'd ride into Charlotte with construction workers and nurses, and line cooks get off near the hotel and step into this glittering world where I wasn't really supposed to exist, not as a person anyway. I was housekeeping, or miss, or honestly just excuse me most days. I didn't date. I didn't go out. I didn't flirt with the bartenders or the security guards the way some of the girls did. I wasn't judging them. I just didn't have any room in my life for that kind of risk. My life was a triangle. Home, hotel, pharmacy. I'd never even been kissed. Sometimes the other maids would tease me about it in the changing room, and I'd laugh it off. But the truth was, romance felt like something that belonged in movies and dusty paperbacks, not in the life of a girl who was budgeting down to the penny and falling asleep with her uniform half folded for the next day. So when I say I did not go looking for a billionaire, I mean it. The idea of a man like that, even knowing my name, felt crazy. He was a rumor at first, a name you heard in the manager's office said a little softer, with a little more respect, like invoking a storm. Mr. Hale is a permanent resident in the penthouse. They told us he expects perfection. He can have any of us fired with one phone call. Be invisible. Be precise. Do not make mistakes in 2401. His full name was Gabriel Hale. If you read the business section, you've seen his last name on half the buildings in the city. Hale Holdings. Hale Development. Some foundation with his parents' names on it. All that. People said he was ruthless in negotiations, cold in person, brilliant in boardrooms. I caught glimpses of him sometimes. Tall, pressed suits that probably cost more than my car would have if I had one hair always perfectly in place, this sharp jaw and these steel-colored eyes that seemed to land on everything and nothing at the same time. He'd walk through the lobby and conversations would dim around him. Women watched him over the rims of their wine glasses and straightened their ties when he passed. I tried to never be in his direct line of sight. I'd duck into service hallways, pretend to be very interested in my cleaning cart when I heard his footsteps. In my head, he was just another kind of storm, beautiful from far away, dangerous up close. Meanwhile, my life was what it had been. Long shifts, sore hands, constant quiet prayers. I'd hum little hymns under my breath while I scrubbed bathroom tiles. I'd whisper, "God, please, I don't know how you're going to make this work, but I need you to." When I counted out cash tips at the end of the week and realized I was still short. It wasn't pretty faith, not the kind you put on a greeting card. It was tired and shaky and full of unanswered whys. But it was all I had left from my mom that didn't fit in a shoebox. Then came the night that changed everything. We were short-staffed again. Someone called out. Someone else had a family emergency, and by late afternoon, I had already done more rooms than I usually did in a full shift. My feet were burning. My lower back felt like someone had been using it as a punching bag, and I had that grainy feeling behind my eyes that told me I was way past needing sleep. My supervisor came up to me with that look on his face, that please don't hate me look, and said, "Maria, can you take a few of the top-floor suites tonight? We really need you." Saying no felt like gambling with Elena's next refill, so I forced a smile and said yes. By the time I got to the top floor, the world felt like it was moving just a half-second ahead of me. I checked my list saw 2401, Hale, long term, and my stomach did this little nervous flip. The manager had briefed us. He had a dinner and meetings across town. He would not be back until after midnight. There should be plenty of time to do the room and leave before he returned. I swiped my keycard, stepped into the penthouse, and did my usual soft housekeeping call, even though I knew it should be empty. The suite was quiet city lights spilling in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of place that looks like it only exists for magazine photos. I went on autopilot, stripped the bed pillowcases into the laundry bag. Fresh sheets, stretched tight duvet, shaken and smoothed. Pillows fluffed. Bathroom next. Scrub the sink, shine. The fixtures wipe down the mirror. Make sure the little bottles are lined up just so. Everything invisible, but perfect. Sooner or later, your body keeps the score. Mine picked that night. I finished the bathroom, went back to the bedroom to check the bed one last time, and suddenly my knees felt weak. My head was pounding. The room leaned a little, and I thought, I just need 1 minute, just 60 seconds. Then I'll finish the dusting and get out of here. So I sat down on the edge of the bed, still upright, feet on the floor, planning to count to 60 in my head. I remember exhaling, just letting my muscles sag for the first time in hours. Then I remember nothing, at least until I heard the door click. You know when you're in a deep sleep and someone slams a door in your dream and it jerks you awake, heart hammering. Not sure what's real yet. That was me, except when I opened my eyes. I wasn't in my own bed. I was stretched out across a bed that smelled like expensive detergent and aftershave. My maid uniform wrinkled my hair, spread over a pillow that was not mine, and there was a tall man in a dark suit just inside the doorway, frozen, staring at me, like he wasn't sure he trusted his own eyes. It was him, Gabriel Hale. In that first split second, I wasn't even embarrassed. I was petrified. Every possible outcome flashed through my brain. Fired on the spot, escorted out by security blacklisted from every decent hotel in the city. Losing my paycheck. Losing the apartment. Losing the only way I had to keep Elena's heart beating steady. I went from asleep to standing in about half a second, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear my own voice as I started talking way too fast. "I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't mean to." I swear I just sat down for a second. I've been working a double. "Please, don't fire me. My sister is sick. I need this job. Please, I'm so sorry." It poured out of me like I'd opened a faucet. My hands were shaking. My throat felt tight, and I hated how small my voice sounded in that huge, perfect room. If he had started yelling, if he'd picked up the phone and called my manager and told them to get rid of me, I wouldn't have been surprised. I'd heard the stories how he cut people off in meetings, how he didn't tolerate mistakes. I braced for it, but he didn't yell. That was the first strange thing. He just stood there for a moment, his eyes taking me in. My rumpled uniform, my bare hands without a ring, the dark circles under my eyes, the panic behind them. And then he did this tiny thing that changed everything. He let out a breath like some part of him had been holding it, and his shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch. "It's fine," he said. 2 words. Quiet even. Not kind exactly, not comforting, but not cruel. I blinked at him. "Sir, I fell asleep in your bed," I said, because apparently my brain thought he might have missed that detail. One corner of his mouth almost ticked up. "I can see that," he replied. "Do you always work this late?" Of all the questions I expected from him, that was not on the list. Not, "What's your name?" Not, Who is your supervisor? Not, what do you think you're doing? Just this simple human question. Do you always work this late? I take extra shifts. I managed. My sister is sick. She has a heart condition. Her medication is expensive. I can't lose this job. There it was. My entire life laid bare in 3 facts. Sick sister, expensive meds, terrified of losing work. He watched my face while I said it, and I remember thinking that his eyes didn't look as cold up close as they did from down in the lobby. They looked tired. Like maybe he knew something about being worn out in a different way. He nodded once, like he'd finished some internal calculation. Then he walked past me, set his briefcase down, opened his laptop on the desk. Finish your work, he said, like this was just any other night. Then you can go. That was it. No lecture. No, this is unacceptable. No, this will be noted on your record. Just go back to work. If it were you, would you trust that? Or would you walk out of there, waiting for the other shoe to drop? Because I have never been more sure I was in trouble in my life, even as I remade the bed with shaking hands, straightened the pillows, grabbed my cleaning cart, and backed out of that room with my heart in my throat. That night, I sat at our tiny kitchen table. After Elena went to bed, my hands still buzzing with leftover adrenaline. I looked around at the chipped cabinets, the sagging couch, the pill bottles lined up like soldiers on the counter. And I thought, if he fires me tomorrow, what do I do? I didn't have an answer. So I did what my mom taught me. I prayed. Not in fancy words, just in that desperate way. God, please, I know I messed up. I'm so tired. Please don't let this be the end of the only thing keeping us afloat. The next morning, I went into work with my stomach tied in knots. I expected to be pulled into the manager's office to see a stack of forms on the desk and hear, "I'm sorry, my hands are tied." Mr. Hale was very clear. Instead, my supervisor just handed out our assignment sheets like normal. When he got to me, though, he paused, looked up, and I could tell something was different. "Hale in 2401, he said. "From now on, he requested that only you clean his suite, no one else." It took my brain a full second to process that. "Only me," I repeated. "Only you," he said, shrugging like he didn't understand it either. "Don't ask me why, just don't screw it up." Of course, the whispers started immediately. Housekeepers talk, we see everything. A couple of the girls raised their eyebrows. Someone made a joke that maybe I had done more than just sleep in that bed. I wanted to sink into the floor. The truth was the opposite. I had never done anything more innocent in my life. I had literally just passed out from exhaustion, and now suddenly I was the maid in the billionaire's room. I decided I would treat it like any other assignment. Go in clean, quietly. Leave pretend there wasn't a very rich man with sharp eyes watching me vacuum his carpet or change his sheets. I told myself if I stayed professional, if I didn't give him any reason to think I wanted anything from him, it would be fine. Life rarely listens to our plans. At first it was simple. I'd knock, hear his voice say, "Come in," see him at the desk, or pacing with his phone pressed to his ear, and I'd go about my work, moving quietly around him like a ghost. But even ghosts make noise sometimes. One night my stomach growled so loud while I was making his bed that I wanted to crawl into the laundry cart and never come out. "Did you eat today?" he asked, without looking up from his laptop. "Yes," I lied automatically. He raised an eyebrow, then actually looked at me. "That's a terrible lie," he said. "When was the last time you ate something that wasn't from a vending machine?" "Maria." He knew my name. I hadn't told him. The realization made my cheeks burn. "Yesterday," I admitted, because lying seemed pointless when my body was literally disagreeing with me out loud. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he went back to typing. I thought that was the end of it, until I was leaving, and he said very casually, Don't skip meals to pay for your sister's medication. Your body will collect those debts. It was such a strange thing to hear from a man whose daily expenses probably equaled my yearly income that I just nodded and slipped out the door. The questions came slowly after that, like he was trying not to spook a stray cat. How long have you worked here? How old is your sister? Do you still go to church? I'd answer as simply as I could. I'd tell him about the early bus, about the small town, about singing in the choir on Sundays, even when my throat felt scratchy, because those old hymns reminded me that I wasn't alone in my pain. Sometimes he'd say nothing, just listen, his face unreadable. Other times, he'd ask something that made it clear he was really paying attention, like, what happens if the insurance refuses to cover her meds 1 month? Slowly, this very strange thing happened. For the first time in a long time, someone was looking at my life, not like a list of inconveniences, but like it mattered. It was disorienting. Then one night, I finished cleaning and saw an envelope on the desk with my name on it, written in neat, familiar handwriting. Inside was cash. A lot of cash, at least by my standards. Enough to cover rent and groceries and a full month of Elena's medications, with some left over. My first instinct wasn't joy. It was fear. I marched over to him. He was standing by the window phone in his hand and held the envelope out. I can't take this, I said, my voice shaking a little. He glanced at the envelope. It's a tip, he replied. Sir, this is not a tip. I said the words coming out before I could soften them. It's too much. Then consider it payment for excellent work. He said something like amusement in his voice. You didn't complain when I made you stay last week until after midnight to change out all the linens because I couldn't sleep, did you? That's my job, I said. And this is mine, he shot back. Let me do it. I stood there torn. Taking that money felt like stepping onto a slippery slope. But on the other hand, Elena's refill was due in a few days, and I had been trying not to think about how I was going to afford it. I thought about my mom, about the way she used to say, sometimes God answers prayers through people's hands. Maybe this was one of those times. I took a breath. Thank you, I said quietly, and slipped the envelope into my bag. That was just the beginning. A week later, I went to the pharmacy with my little stack of crumpled bills in my hand, ready to pay what I always paid, and the clerk shook her head. There's no balance, she said. It's covered. Looks like some foundation picked up the tab. My stomach jumped. I asked which foundation. She shrugged. Some heart charity. It's in the system as anonymous, she said. I walked out of there lightheaded. Anonymous generosity isn't really anonymous when there's only one person in your life right now who has that kind of reach and reason. Groceries started showing up outside our door too. Not flashy stuff. No fancy chocolates, no champagne. Bags of rice beans, eggs, fresh vegetables, good bread, chicken. The kind of things I used to stare at in the store and calculate if I could afford this week or not. There was never a note, but I knew. And every time I opened the door and bent down to pick up another box, I felt this tangle of gratitude and dread. Because here's the thing, kindness like that isn't neutral. It moves your heart whether you want it to or not. I told myself over and over, this is just guilt. This is just him trying to feel like a good person. Don't make it more than it is. But my heart didn't always listen. It noticed the way his voice softened when he asked about Elena. It heard the silence when I mentioned my mom. It saw the flicker in his eyes when I talked about faith, like it wasn't some silly superstition. I never flirted with him, never touched him, never gave him the kind of coy smiles the movies teach you to use on rich men. I stayed on my side of the line, kept my hands busy with sheets and cleaning cloths, tried to protect my heart by reminding myself every night, men like him do not end up with girls like you. This is just a strange, temporary little connection. Nothing more. Spoiler, my heart did not care about my little pep talks. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. You know that feeling when you sense a shadow you didn't notice before, when you realize someone else has been watching a story you thought only had two main characters. That shadow was his mother. I should have realized someone like Gabriel didn't just live in that penthouse without a whole network of people keeping tabs on him. Board members, assistants, investors, and his parents. His mother, Evelyn, was the kind of woman you read about in society pages. Always perfectly put together, always photographed on the arm of someone powerful, always involved in some charity gala or another. Old money mixed with new power. One afternoon, the lobby lights seemed a shade brighter, and the air got a little thinner, the way it does when someone very important walks in. I was pushing my cleaning cart through the back hall when my supervisor came hurrying toward me, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Maria," he said, "Mrs. Hale would like to speak with you, in the private dining room." Now, everything inside me went cold. Why would his mother want to talk to me? I washed my hands twice in the staff bathroom, straightened my uniform, smoothed my hair back, whispered a quick prayer, and walked down to the private dining room. My shoes sounding way too loud on the floor. She was already there when I walked in, sitting like she owned not just the room, but the building and the city outside of it. Tailored suit pearls hair that probably cost more to maintain than my yearly rent. She smiled when she saw me, but it was the kind of smile that didn't touch her eyes at all. "Maria," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Sit." Her voice left no room for argument. I sat, folded my hands in my lap to hide the slight shaking. She poured tea into delicate cups, like this was some friendly little chat between girlfriends. "I've heard very good things about the state of my son's suite," she began. "He is a particular man. It takes skill to meet his standards." "Thank you, ma'am," I said, keeping my eyes respectful, my posture straight. She studied me for a moment like she was appraising a piece of furniture. "You are a lovely girl," she said finally. "I can see why Gabriel is drawn to you." My heart stuttered. She said his first name like she owned every letter of it. "You have a certain sweetness, a kind of purity," she went on, like she was describing a flavor of dessert, not a human being. "But let's be clear, my son's world is not your world, and yours is not his." I stayed quiet. Arguing with someone like her felt like yelling into a hurricane. "There are rules in our circles," she continued. "Press investors, other families watching. Women who come from where you come from with the kind of life you have lived, they do not survive there. Not really. They get chewed up, judged for every move called names I won't repeat. They become targets. And more importantly, they become weaknesses." That word stung. Weakness. Like loving someone from a different background makes you a liability. "He might think he loves you," she said, sipping her tea. "He might be enchanted by your story, your faith, your little sister. But time changes people. He would resent you eventually for not understanding his world, for slowing him down, for giving his enemies something to attack. And you would be crushed by the pressure. I have seen it before. It hurt because part of me believed her. Not because I thought I was lesser, but because I knew how vicious people could be when they smelled a story they thought was beneath them. I'd seen it play out in tabloids and talk shows the way the world tears apart any woman they think doesn't belong next to a man like him. I swallowed, felt my heart pounding in my throat. I could have lied, could have pretended I didn't care about him. But my mouth did something braver than my brain. "I love him," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "But I will not allow myself to be his burden." For the first time, her expression shifted just a little. Something like respect flickered for half a second before the mask dropped back into place. "Good," she said simply. That makes this easier. I didn't know what this meant yet, but I found out soon enough. After that meeting, I went back to my work, pretending nothing had changed, but everything felt different. I could feel her eyes on me even when she wasn't physically there. I could feel this countdown that I couldn't see, but knew was ticking. And sure enough, a few days later, a social worker from a hospital I'd never been to called me. They said they'd reviewed Elena's case. They said there was a spot opening up for surgery, the kind of surgery that could repair her heart. Strengthen it, give her a chance at a normal life. They said it would cost more money than I could even wrap my mind around. But an anonymous benefactor had stepped in and offered to pay for everything. The operation, the hospital stay, the medications, the follow-ups. I remember holding the phone so tightly, my fingers hurt staring at the wall in our little apartment, while the social worker's voice blurred at the edges. It felt like a miracle. It felt like an answer to every desperate prayer I'd whispered into my pillow at night. And yet somewhere under all that joy, something felt off, like there was a string attached that I couldn't see yet. Who, I finally managed, who is paying for this? I can't say, she replied. They're anonymous. They told us they just wanted to help a deserving family. Do you accept the offer? If it were you, what would you have done in that moment? Hung up and said no, because you didn't like the mystery or clung to that lifeline with both hands, knowing your sister's life might literally depend on it. Because as much as my brain buzzed with suspicion, as much as I could hear Evelyn's voice in the background of my thoughts, my heart saw one thing clearly. Elena living long enough to graduate high school to fall in love someday, to have a life that wasn't measured in refills and checkups. I accepted. We set the surgery date. I signed papers I barely understood, trusting that the doctors knew what they were doing. At night, when Elena was asleep, I sat at the table and looked around our tiny apartment and at my housekeeping schedule, and I knew in my bones that this offer wasn't as simple as it appeared. Things that expensive in a world run by people like the Hales rarely are. I thought about what Evelyn had said about weaknesses and burdens. I thought about Gabriel, about the way he'd looked at me lately, softer, like I was no longer just housekeeping in his eyes. And I realized what this really was, not just a gift, but a door. A door I was supposed to walk through and not come back. So I made the hardest choice of my life. I went to work one last time. I cleaned 2401 like it was any other day, maybe even more carefully than usual, folding corners, tighter polishing surfaces until they glowed. He was gone at a meeting, or on a plane, or wherever men like him disappear to. A selfish part of me was grateful, because I didn't know how to say goodbye to his face. I turned in my uniform after my shift, handed over my ID badge, and signed the exit papers with shaking hands. I didn't leave a note. I told myself it would be easier for him that way. Cleaner, like ripping off a bandage. The truth was, I didn't trust myself not to beg him to come with me if I had to look him in the eye and walk away. I went home, packed our suitcases, kept just what we could carry. I paid the rent through the end of the month with the last of my cash, so the landlord wouldn't come knocking with questions right away. The next morning before the sun was up, I put Elena in a cab, and we left that city behind. On the outside, it probably looked like I ran away. Maybe I did. Inside, it felt like I was ripping my own heart out in exchange for the chance to keep my sister's heart beating. It felt like the kind of sacrifice no one would ever see, except maybe God. The next part I only know from what Gabriel told me later, so imagine it in your mind like a parallel movie. He came back to his suite 2 days after my last shift, and something felt off the second he walked in. The air felt stale. The bed was made perfectly, but the pillows weren't fluffed quite the way I usually did them. He asked the manager where I was. She quit, they said. No notice. He went to my apartment, found it empty. He called my phone, got that cold, disconnected tone. For the first time in a life defined by control and solutions and leverage, he hit a wall he couldn't break. Money couldn't buy my forwarding address. Connections couldn't produce my new phone number. He checked hospitals, churches, charities, anywhere. He thought a girl like me might go when she vanished. Nothing. I was gone. He went back to his glass office, staring out at a city that suddenly felt smaller and emptier. And he tried to do what he'd always done, bury feelings under work. But grief doesn't care about your meeting schedule. It seeps into everything. Then, one afternoon, his assistant dropped a file on his desk. Routine. Receipts, reports, charity disbursements from the Hale Foundation. He flipped through them absently until he saw it. Carolina Heart Center. Patient ID he didn't recognize. But the breakdown caught him. Pediatric cardiac surgery, 5 figures for medication, follow-up appointments listed out for months. It was the date that did it. Scheduled right when I had left. And at the bottom of the page, paid in full, donor Evelyn Hale. That was the twist that turned his world upside down. Do you think that's fair, by the way? That someone with enough money can reach into your life, into your most desperate need, and turn it into a bargaining chip without ever saying your name out loud? He called the hospital, confirmed the details, and when they told him the patient's guardian had a Spanish accent and a little sister named Elena, any doubt vanished. His mother hadn't just protected him. She had paid for my sister's surgery in exchange for my disappearance. She had bought my silence, my absence, my heartbreak. And I had agreed without knowing she was the one sliding the check across the table. He went to her that night into that big house that had never felt like home, and he didn't sit down. He didn't say hello. He just stood there in the middle of her polished living room and said very quietly, "You had no right." She tried to spin it, of course. Said she was protecting him from a girl who would drag him down. Said she was protecting me from a world that would destroy me. Said I should be grateful because my sister would live. Maybe you even agree with her a little. That's the messy part. Gabriel didn't. He told her she had raised him to believe love was weakness, that emotions were a liability, that legacy mattered more than happiness, and that for 33 years he had believed her. Then he said my name and told her I had shown him something different, that strength can look like a girl working 14-hour shifts and still singing in church on Sunday, that sacrifice can look like a sister skipping meals so another sister can breathe, that faith can survive even when the world keeps taking. He told her he was done. Done with being her project. Done with being the shiny Hale heir. Done with sitting on top of an empire that meant nothing if it required him to walk over people like me to keep it standing. And because he is still at his core, a man who goes all in, he didn't just threaten to leave. He signed everything over, gave her controlling interest in the companies, the properties, the legacy she'd cared so much about. Kept enough to make his own way, refused the rest. She threatened to cut him off, disown him, ruin him. He walked out anyway. All of that happened while I was in another city holding Elena's hand in a hospital room. I had no idea my choice had lit a fuse in his life too. The surgery was brutal to watch even from the waiting room. Hours ticked by like days. I paced. I prayed. I stared at the floor until the patterns in the tiles looked like maps. When the surgeon finally came out, pulled his mask down and said, "It went well. Her heart is stronger now." I almost collapsed from relief. They let me see her in recovery, pale and groggy, but alive tubes everywhere, machines beeping steadily. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "We did it," even though I knew it was more complicated than that. After she was strong enough, We moved to a small town near Asheville, up in the mountains, where the air smelled like rain and pine trees and fresh bread if you were standing outside the right building. That building was Ruth's Bakery. Ruth was this older woman with laugh lines around her eyes and flour on her apron more often than not. She didn't ask many questions when I came in asking for work. "Can you be here at 5?" she said. "Can you learn? Can you lift a 50-pound bag of flour without complaining too much?" I said yes to all of it. Baking became my new version of prayer. There was something almost holy about it. Mixing simple ingredients with your hands, kneading dough until it turned smooth under your palms, watching it rise, and then transform in the heat of the oven. I'd be there in the dark before dawn, unlocking the door, while the world was still quiet, humming old hymns, while I shaped loaves and rolled out croissants. It was hard in a different way than housekeeping, but there was a rhythm to it that soothed something jagged inside me. We rented a tiny apartment above a hardware store. You could hear the door chime below every time someone came in for nails or paint, but the rent was affordable, and the landlord didn't ask many questions. Elena recovered in fits and starts, some days full of energy, some days exhausted, but always, always more stable than before. I watched color come back to her cheeks and thought, this is worth anything. This is worth everything. On the outside, my life looked calmer. On the inside, there was still this constant ache. I tried to convince myself I had closed the door on Gabriel, that he belonged to another life, now to another version of me, who still pushed a cleaning cart through marble hallways. I prayed, God, please help me forget him. Help me move on. Help me not wake up, thinking about the way he looked at me when he asked if I'd eaten. Some nights it worked. Some nights it didn't. Then one morning in early November, I was wiping down the bakery display case, watching raindrops slide down the front window in slow tracks when the bell over the door chimed. I looked up expecting one of our regulars, maybe an older man who always bought rye bread, or a mom with a stroller. Instead, a man stood there, dripping on the doormat hair, plastered to his forehead. No umbrella in sight. Shirt clinging to his shoulders. Jeans instead of a suit. For half a second, my brain refused to put his face into this setting. It was like seeing a character from one movie step into another. Then my heart recognized him before my eyes could finish the job. It was Gabriel. We just stared at each other for a long moment. The world outside went fuzzy. The humming refrigerators, the ticking clock. Everything faded behind the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. He looked different, less polished, more human, tired in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. But those eyes were the same. He took a few steps toward the counter slow, like he was afraid I'd run if he moved too quickly. I grabbed the edge of the glass to keep my hands from shaking. "How did you find me?" I asked, my voice a little rough. He let out this little breath that was half laugh, half sigh. "I hired every private investigator I could," he said. "I drove through every small town within 200 miles. I went into 63 bakeries, coffee shops, and diners, asking if anyone had seen a girl named Maria with dark hair and eyes that look like they still believe in something. 3 days ago, someone in Asheville mentioned a Maria at Ruth's Bakery. So, here I am." "That's crazy," I said before I could stop myself. "Yeah," he replied softly, "I know. I should have been furious. I should have told him to leave. Instead, the first thing that came out of my mouth was, 'You shouldn't have come. Your mother was right. I don't belong in your world. I would just be a burden, a weakness." He shook his head, rain still dripping onto the floor. "I didn't come to drag you into my world," he said. "I came to ask if you'd let me stay in yours." I frowned. "What does that even mean?" "It means I walked away," he said. "From the company, from the penthouse, from the whole life that made me feel nothing. I gave it to my mother. She can have the legacy that control the empire. I realized none of it mattered if I had to live it without you. I stared at him, trying to process that. You gave it away, I repeated. As much as I could legally, he said, a trace of wry humor in his voice. Turns out you can't quite resign from your own last name, but you can step off the throne people built for you. I kept enough to pay back some people I owed to start over somewhere else, but the rest, it's hers now. That's what she always wanted anyway. But why? I asked, because I needed to hear him say it. He stepped a little closer, lowered his voice. Because I found out what she did, he said. I saw the hospital receipt, Maria. Carolina Heart Center. Pediatric cardiac surgery for a girl named Elena. Paid in full by Evelyn Hale. I called, I confirmed. And I realized she had used your sister's life to buy your absence. She gave you a choice nobody should ever have to make. And you chose Elena. Of course you did. You always would. She thought that meant she had won. She didn't understand that she also showed me exactly what kind of person you are. That was the twist for me. I'd suspected, sure. I'd put two and two together in the dark of my room and come up with her name more than once. But hearing him say it out loud, hearing that he knew that he had seen the cost of my decision and didn't resent me for it, something inside me that had been tight for months just broke. Tears burned behind my eyes. I didn't know it was her, I whispered. I just knew it was the only way to save Elena. I know, he said. I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at her. At the way our world thinks it can buy people, buy silence, buy obedience. She thought she was protecting me from a mistake. She didn't understand she was pushing me toward the only real thing I've ever had. Behind me, I heard a soft noise and realized Ruth had been standing in the doorway to the kitchen for who knows how long, taking this all in with those sharp, kind eyes. She stepped out, wiped her hands on her apron, and looked between the two of us like she'd been expecting this scene for weeks. Well, she said, God sure knows how to write a story, doesn't he? Maria, child. If you don't come around that counter right now and talk to this man properly, I'm firing you myself. We all laughed a little hysterically. It broke the tension in the loveliest way. I walked around the counter slowly, each step feeling like a step away from fear and toward something frightening for a different reason. Standing in front of him, I could see every line on his face, every sleepless night. He reached up like he wanted to touch my cheek, then hesitated, letting me make the choice. I loved you the moment you didn't fire me, I said, because after everything lying felt impossible. I loved you when you asked me if I'd eaten, when you paid for Elena's meds, when you listened to me talk about my mom. I've tried to stop. I couldn't. He closed the distance, his hands coming up to cradle my face so gently it made my eyes sting. Then let me spend the rest of my life being someone worthy of that love, he said. Yeah, that line sounds like it came from a movie, but when a man has given away billions for the chance to say it, it hits different. He kissed me. Soft, careful, like I was something sacred and breakable. The rain tapped the windows, the ovens hummed in the background, and for a moment the whole world shrank down to the space between us. We sat at a corner table after that drinking coffee that had gone lukewarm while we poured our stories out on the table between us. He told me about the confrontation with his mother, about walking out of the office for the last time, about driving through small towns with my name on a crumpled piece of paper in his pocket. I told him about the surgery, about Elena's recovery, about kneading dough at 4 a.m, trying not to think about what I'd left behind. We didn't solve everything in an hour. There were logistics, of course. Where would we live? What kind of job would he do now? How would we navigate the inevitable noise when people found out he'd chosen a baker's assistant over a board seat? But those suddenly felt like details, not obstacles. The big thing had already happened. He had chosen love over legacy. I had chosen to open the door I had slammed shut on my own heart. In the months that followed, our life shifted into a new shape. Gabriel found work on a construction crew in Asheville, something physically exhausting and honest. He'd come home with dust in his hair, calluses forming on his palms, and this light in his eyes I'd never seen back when he wore a suit every day. "I built a wall today," he'd say, grinning. Like actually built it, not approved a budget for it. And we'd laugh because who would have thought? I stayed at the bakery, moved up to doing more than just wiping counters and shaping loaves. Ruth taught me the science behind the recipes, the why behind the measurements. And slowly I realized I was good at it. That maybe my hands could create comfort, as well as clean up after it. Elena moved in with us once she was fully independent again. We lived in that small apartment above the hardware store, 3 people and a lot of secondhand furniture. And for the first time in years, the air in our home didn't feel thick with fear. We still had struggles. This is real life. Some months the bills made me bite my lip while I did the math. Some nights Gabriel woke up from dreams where his mother was standing at the edge of our bed, judging, and I'd have to remind him that she couldn't touch us here. Sometimes people recognized him in the grocery store and whispered, "Is that?" And we'd feel the weight of their curiosity on our backs. But we had dinners at a wobbly kitchen table where Elena laughed until she cried, telling stories about customers at the hardware store. We had lazy Sunday afternoons after church where we'd nap on the couch tangled up together like we'd been doing it all our lives. We had moments where Gabriel would hold my hands, look me in the eye, and say, "Thank you for falling asleep in my bed that night. I know you didn't mean to, but it saved me." That's the part that still gets me. I thought I was losing everything when I walked away from him. I thought I was choosing between love and survival, between my happiness and my sister's life. I didn't realize that sometimes in the strangest ways, choosing the right thing for someone else can circle back around and become the right thing for you too. So now I want to ask you, as someone who just listened to way too much of my heart, if it were you sitting in that private dining room with a powerful woman, basically telling you her son isn't allowed to love you with your sister's life, quietly on the negotiation table, what would you have done? Would you have walked away like I did? Vanished to protect him and save her? Or would you have stayed and fought the system, even if it meant risking your sister's chance at health? Do you think what his mother did was unforgivable manipulation? Or do you see it as a twisted kind of protection from her point of view? And what about Gabriel? Was he reckless for giving up a billionaire empire to chase a girl who bakes bread in a mountain town? Or was that the first truly sane decision of his life? How much is enough when it comes to money and power before it starts owning you instead of you owning it? Do you think love like this exists outside of stories? Or do you think I just got lucky accidentally napping my way into a miracle? I really want to know what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me whose side you're on. What you would have done differently, whether you think I was foolish or brave or both. And if you've ever been in a situation where someone with more power tried to control your life for your own good, I want to hear about that too, because these aren't just rich people problems. This is about who gets to decide what kind of life you deserve. If this story made you feel anything, if you got angry, if you teared up, if you smiled at the idea of a billionaire swinging a hammer on a construction site instead of signing papers in a glass tower, please hit like so more people can find it. Subscribe if you want more real stories about love and faith and the messy ways they crash into money and power, and share this video with someone who might need a reminder that one exhausted mistake does not have to be the end of their story. Sometimes, if you let it, it might be the beginning of the one you were always meant to live.